Started. Very
Yep.
good. All right. Well, good evening, everybody. This is the, gosh, what is it now? The November meeting of the Wiehle Avenue Pedestrian Study Group. We've been going at this now for a number of months, and really appreciate everybody's participation. This has been a pretty consistent group. It's been good, and we appreciate everybody's involvement. Um, we are. Um, Well, I tell you what, I'm gonna have Lori go through the ground rules, and then I'll go back and summarize kind of where we are to date, and kind of give a sense of what we're trying to accomplish this evening.
Thanks, Rob. I think um, this is a rather a small but consistent group who joins here. And thank you all for coming. And I think you probably all know the ground rules. We start and stop at the times we say we're going to start and stop. We're all thoughtful and wait for people to speak, and everybody gets an opportunity to speak. And there's no um, microphone hogs. We share it across the board. We might not go as long as we normally go, 9 o'clock tonight, just because our agenda this evening is light unless there are lots of questions. And some of you may have handled your questions offline, so I don't know how long we're going to be going tonight. So Rob will have to gauge that as we go along, okay? And I'll turn it back over to Rob to kind of summarize where we are, and then we'll turn to you all for questions.
Okay, so I always forget to say this. So I guess we're on Cisco WebEx meeting tonight, and there is a participants, viewer, I think in the lower right-hand corner for most of us. And if you populate and open up the participants, there's a way to raise your hand. There's a little hand in the lower right-hand corner. And so as we move along, that's always a way to try to get our attention, and we'll try to monitor that for people that have questions. And then and usually Jose is really good at monitoring and like making sure we don't miss anybody. So tonight we're to summarize where we are. The first couple meetings we reviewed some of the options that were put forth by the applicant, and we reviewed the various options that they had, and then we moved into a couple alternatives that were suggested that we look at. Things like a tunnel, things like alternative crossing concepts, and then the Fairfax County Department of Transportation at our more recent meetings had their consultant join in, and they've given us a couple presentations now. And the last one I thought was just very informative, where it began to summarize a lot of the options that we've looked at, and it started to put things in perspective in terms of cost and in terms of some of the issues that they saw with some of the concepts. I think some of it was pretty enlightening, and things that we hadn't picked up on or focused on quite yet, where when it gets into the truly constructability aspects of certain concepts, or the safety aspects of concepts, or the ability for them to even be approved from a regulatory standpoint. They brought some of those issues to light. And so it was just, again, just more information helps us all kind of, formulate our opinions, and just kind of helps us, balance all this information. So I think where we are tonight is we're ready to migrate into what I'm going to consider the final phase of where we try to formulate our opinions on the various options. And if you'll recall, for those of us who've been here since the beginning, Supervisor Alcorn first, started us off by saying, we're not necessarily looking for this study group to come up with one voted suggestion and just that be the end all, but rather formulate people's ideas and opinions, and formulate, and maybe it'll start to, some ideas maybe some preferred options will migrate to the top versus others to the bottom, and then maybe the county can use that as a guide as they move forward. So we're trying to figure out what's going to be the best way to do that, the best way to summarize our thoughts and put some of our ideas into a perspective that others can take and they're run with it from that point forward. So that's kind of what I think we're here to talk about, if I'm not mistaken, Lori. And I don't know if we plan to kind of share the matrix tonight that you developed, or not. I wasn't sure, but
so we didn't. One of the things that we'd like to talk about after people ask their questions, is how do we summarize this data? How do we pull it into one big grid? And then how do we prioritize what people value the most? And so those were two things that I sort of was jumping ahead and really need to be more of a collaborative effort with all of the team included in it so that we can continue on our path of being as transparent as possible with all the information, with all the parties involved. And so one of the things that I had done was put together a very, very simplified version of all the data, the masses of data that you've gotten so far into 10 buckets. And then across each of those options that we have been shared with us, the different options for the crossing, what are each of those items and how do they measure up? What is the cost across all those items, so that you can just look at a one pager. And granted, it doesn't go into depth about what we've done here, and anybody would have 10 more questions on it, just because they haven't gone through this year-long process that you've gone through to figure out, wow, it's not just a cost, it's 10 other things involved in the cost, or that cost might not be the only cost, there might be additional costs. So each item is a lot bigger than a summary. But when you look at a summary, it just helps you focus a little bit on, wow, now that I look at it in summary format, I really need to figure out what I value the most. Is it having a system that is 100% safe for people to cross through all the time and will have absolutely no accidents, contributed to it? Or am I more interested in having an absolutely 100% paid for item that is going to be done and I don't have to worry about it, so there'll be something there? Or is it more important that it's there in a timely fashion, and that it can be done sooner rather than later? Or do I want to just wait and get the best option for us? So those were all the things that I was starting to puzzle in my head. And I think it's best left for maybe after this meeting to just distribute where we are with it, and figure out, should we include our neighbors in a kind of a survey? What should our next steps be? Are we the only group that should be, should we be reaching back out to the people who asked us to come here and get their input? And I don't expect us to have one solution. I expect us to have hopefully four, maybe three options, and the pros and cons for all of them to present to Walter Alcorn, who is here tonight. But that Walter will at least have, hey, these are all the pros and cons of all these things. And most people are feeling like they like option C, or most people like option E, and it's because of the pros or it's because of the cons. And so to formulate some thinking around it, this is the harder part, right? Just getting the data, that was the easier part. Formulating how we're going to presented what's most valued by you, the developer, or valued by you, the homeowner, or valued by you, Fairfax County. That's kind of where we're going with this. So what I long way around, Rob, is I don't know how we want to proceed tonight, because we were rethinking how we wanted to move forward, and just asking questions tonight, which were allowing people to ask questions about the different options, was where we ended up. And then deciding how to send out the rest of the information and summarize, and how should we proceed would be the next part. I guess I'm kind of interested in what other people would say. I would be happy to share what we've done so far, but I also don't want to cut into people's time to ask any questions they have. So maybe it's best to do that at the end if there's time.
Okay, that sounds good. So if I may, let me start off with a question, and maybe that'll start the dialogue here a little bit. And this is a question that I'm going to direct it to Mark Dreyfus at Fairfax County Department of Transportation, but then it really might be directed to the Cornerstone applicant. So I was when the consultant for Fairfax County gave us their last presentation or two, one of the things that caught my ear was they felt that some of the alternatives that were these options 1A, B, and C that we had looked at, some of the widths of the trail crossing, the bridge crossings over Wiehle Avenue were of a width that might not be suitable for the intended need. And when I went back and looked at the drawings, I didn't see that type of data on the drawings. You could put a scale to the drawing and maybe ascertain some information from that, but I don't recall seeing actual dimensional information about trail width, and then I also looked in the proffers and I didn't see it there. So I was just wanted to ask the question: maybe I missed something. I might have missed it somewhere else, but or to the applicant, was the I don't know, plans meant to be a little bit more generic in nature, and some of that width information would just be kind of figured out in the future.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I thank you, everybody, for joining us once again. With me this evening are Matthew Ridgway and Colin McCormick from Fair and Peers, and Sagar Divrakar from STV. And Sagar, would you be the best person to be able to answer this question? If not, let me know, and I can pass it over to Colin.
Good evening, everyone. I think I'm hearing a little bit of an echo, so.
You sound fine.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Fine. Okay. So yes, you're right that there was no transfer section or a typical section showing the width of the bridge. So we had determined it based on the plans that were that were showed, like the scale and the PDF that we had. That's how we had determined the width of the bridge, and also just looking at verifying the dimensions of the lane width and everything for the road. We felt that that's what the dimension for the bridge is shown. So that's how we had determined that it was 6 foot or 6 foot in the applicant's drawings.
Okay. So then to the applicant, Brian or Ken, I don't know if you have an opinion here or whatever. I'm just curious if there was the understanding that maybe bridge width could be determined at some future time, and the appropriate width would be considered at some later time.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the drawings were drawn to scale with the intended width there.
Okay. All right, very good. That was my question. Tammy Petrine, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Rob. This was my concern immediately, that the last meeting was so informative when engineers actually looked at options. And what struck me was that what was offered, and I'm going to use this phrase and you may find it pejorative or not, quick and dirty at the approval hearing for this and accepted by the Board of Supervisors as an option or as a condition of approval that the applicant Cornerstone meet with a citizens group. And here, lo and behold, we find out that all of their paid for options have serious construction problems, inability to locate elevator banks on a property that they do not own. They do not want to move the elevator bank on their side of the east side of the Wiehle onto their property. So these options were set up with serious flaws to begin with. The other thing is that from a person who's been involved with land use planning in Reston for years, I am very concerned about the levels of service on Wiehle. And, you know, yes, I want people to be safe. Absolutely, positively, pedestrians and cyclists have to have safe connectivity. Yes, absolutely. All four corners of the grid with the tollway have to function properly. Yes, absolutely. We know none of this is going to be built until Cornerstone draws, you know, has the their permits and their building in place. It's going to be years probably before this happens. We also don't know what Comstock to the west is going to do. So I'm very frustrated because this needs to be a coordinated effort to get the best, most elegant solution. There's no easy solution. And I am chafing at that, and I'm sure others are too, but I'm very concerned about how Wiehle functions. And as for the traffic, we're going to have a very different traffic pattern with the full stop at Sunrise. And I understand that that is necessary, but I'm very concerned post-COVID that we don't get stacked up back going the north of the Sunrise intersection. So, and that's going to interface with the toll road intersections and on and on and on. So it just grows on itself. So anyway, I don't know how to comment. Ken just said, oh, you know, the drawings are the drawings and that's what they agreed to. Well, how can they agree to stuff that isn't to code? That is very confusing to me, and I don't know what the legality of that is. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. I don't see anybody else's hand up, so if you're struggling, oh, there's Scott Leary.
Oh, trying to get my video on, sorry. I just want to point out that while I take Tammy's point very seriously, as everyone knows, I am a traffic engineer, and yes, I'm still exiled to Polk County, Florida. Level of service as a determinant of transportation operability is truly on its way out as a means of determinant. And even a properly done at-grade crossing would, a properly done pedestrian network, let me put it that way, a properly done pedestrian network would achieve what is going to become the metric you're going to see within the next 10 years, and that is a reduction in vehicle miles traveled. So I'm not disagreeing with her that Wiehle needs to function and operate efficiently. I'm just cautioning using that metric to make large decisions looking forward, because it's not going to be all that long before that metric is not the standard of the field.
Can you
That's all I
explain,
got for now.
Scott, can you explain a little bit more why that is?
Because so level of service is defined in the highway capacity manual as it's been quantified, but the actual intent is the comfort of a vehicle operator. It is entirely auto-centric. It does not take into account bicyclists, pedestrians, any other modes of transportation. It is only an auto-centric piece. And when you design intersections using only level of service, you end up over-designing for 2 out of 24 hours in a day, and you end up with intersections that are huge, pedestrian unfriendly, bicycle unfriendly, and for 22 hours of the day have absolutely excess capacity.
So
the goal moving forward will be, and we in the field, at least not that I've seen yet, we have not quite come up with the metrics to measure this fully yet, but we in the field are looking at the reduction in vehicle miles traveled, which means land use that is geared to non-auto-centric occupants.
So I think we're all going for this, or at least you and I and Tammy are all thinking along the same lines of balancing the amount of car traffic and the beautification of the neighborhood with the mobility of people and encouraging them to live, work, and play, as we're supposed to in our Reston community with our bikes and our, strollers and our walking, which is phenomenal. And there's always people who are new to the area, their jaws drop at the choices of paths and walkways that we have around here that are just phenomenal. So I guess I'm trying to understand how to measure, even measure traffic going forward, because I work for a company that is seeing huge influx in traffic right now, independent vehicles. People are buying, renting, and owning more vehicles because they don't want to get in a metro anymore. So, it's a very confusing landscape. And now you're adding, you want to change one of the metrics by which we're trying to coordinate our efforts here. So I'm getting
I'm not trying to change the metrics. I'm cautioning against using that metric as a sole indicator of the efficiency of the transportation network.
Okay.
Lori and Scott, let me have Bruce Wright weigh in here, because I know Bruce had previously spoken about being multimodal, and I think that's where Scott's comment is coming from a little bit in terms of the trend toward looking at multimodal, where you look more at the combination of cars and people and bikes and strollers and scooters and that. And so let's hear from Bruce for a second. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi Rob. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I agree 100% with Scott, and I think that metric is working its way out. And what he has said about if we design for LOS, it really does leave out the other modes. There isn't a good pedestrian level of service or a bicycle level of service that gets factored into these measures. I think that this is a really good time to step back and take a look at Wiehle Avenue and to see how we can make that a better street, safer. Maybe traffic won't flow a lot faster in a couple of hours of rush hour, but the street could be a much safer, more attractive street, I think, if we either use some of the funds that would be dedicated to a bridge to instead work on making Wiehle a better street. So related to that, I've got two questions. One is, I guess this would be directed to, I think I see that Tom Bashadny is on, is regarding a study of Wiehle between Sunrise Valley and Sunset Hills. It seems like now is the time to do that, and I'm just wondering what the time frame for that is, and whether there's funds for that, and how soon that can be started and completed.
So thanks for the question, Bruce. This is Tom Bashadny. We are interested in moving forward with that study. Within the last couple of weeks, I turned in a budget request for the FY22 budget to seek money for that study. I will say that there will be a lot of priorities and a lot of needs that will need to be considered in the budget process. But I did submit a request for money for that study based on work that a number of people in our department pulled together to pull together kind of the outline for that study.
All right. Well, thanks, Tom. But it does seem like Tammy referenced Comstock, and they're going to be going ahead before too long. And if they're on board with trying to make Wiehle a better street, and if Cornerstones is, it seems like this is an ideal time to make some changes there. One other question regarding the if there is an at-grade crossing and we don't do the bridges, which is my preference, doing the at-grade and making the street safer rather than adding another layer that to me isn't that aesthetically pleasing. When would the funds from the developer, the $1.5 million, as I understand it, come to the county? I guess that's the question to whoever.
All right. So the as we've discussed previously, the overpasses would be triggered by the first residential use permit for building C, which was the large building along the toll road. At the same time, if one of the overpasses was not chosen, that would also be the trigger for funding.
Any idea what that time frame might be from the developer folks? I know it's hard to say, but rough guess.
I was going to say, I think hard to say. It's forecasting in every environment's difficult. In this one, I'd say it's that much more so. So I think
Sure.
We'll see how well the vaccines roll out and how much people want to use metrics going forward.
Yeah, good point. Mm-hmm. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Bruce.
That's all I've got for now.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. No, that's good. Good comments. Tammy, did you have another comment, or is your hand just still up?
Yeah, no, I do.
Okay.
So Scott, I'm getting that LOS is the white privilege term for preferencing vehicle traffic, and I'm so thrilled that you brought that up and you're informing us of changes coming. However, let's not get lost in the fact that the LOS at the intersections around here are E or F, and we hope we're going to have less traffic if and when phase 2 of Metro comes. We do not know, but it's bad, and we have over 100,000 people that we are going to be accommodating with connectivity. So the idea that we can in any way minimize any, whether it's pedestrian, bicycle, or vehicle, to preference another one is folly. We have a lot of through traffic in Reston that we can't control. And that has to get out of here. We have homes that are adjacent on Sunrise that can't get out of their neighborhoods when COVID ends and business picks back up. So, and we don't know, we may not have the amount of commuters again, but we sure are going to have through traffic. So I just want to call that to your attention. Also, I'm a little discouraged because 1.5 million is a fraction of what one of the bridges would cost Cornerstone. So it's like they're getting out of jail free at 1.5. And I don't even think if 1.5 would pay for a bicycle pedestrian bridge across the Dulles Toll Road on the east side, I would be so thrilled. But that won't even begin to touch the cost of a pedestrian bicycle bridge. So it just seems sort of like an unholy alliance where the developer is going to skate on this with 1.5 million unless we pick something that we really hate, which is one of the bridges. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. So Michael McDermott has a question. And before we get to Michael, Tammy, just in response, I was reminded in your comment about, I think it was Tom Bashadny and Mark had reminded us that, the traffic patterns in Wiehle Avenue will likely change when the Wiehle Avenue station is not the terminus station in the metro system. And we're all kind of waiting, obviously to see that once metro opens. And now with the pandemic, it'll even take longer to kind of resume back to normal traffic patterns. But that is something we all should just kind of keep in the back of our minds, that it will be interesting to see if that has an appreciable difference to us in the Reston area. But so Michael, can we go to you?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to ask Tom, and this follows what Bruce was asking, I think. The study that Tom was talking about, I missed the streets that it covered. Was it Sunrise Valley, Sunset Hills, or was it some other set of streets?
Michael, this is go ahead.
It was Wiehle Avenue from starting at Sunrise Valley, and I think it goes north of Sunset Hills. I think it goes several intersections north of Sunset Hills, but generally the area in between Sunrise Valley and Sunset Hills.
Okay, and a quick follow-up then. You've put the budget in, which is great. Do you have any sense if that budget does get approved, when the study would happen? I mean, within next year, 2 years, 3 years? What's your sense if the budget does get approved?
So if the board typically will be acting on the budget in late April, early May. If we knew that the money was getting approved, then we have on-call consultants that could be brought on board relatively quickly during the summer of next year and get started. And, in terms of the length, how long it would take, it probably depends on how much input and how much participation we have along the way. But we would definitely want to have that. And, to do it right, it's probably about a year, I would think. Maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, but probably in that time frame to get the recommendations from the study.
Great, thanks.
Oh, and I should note that one of the things that we do need to just take into account is that we want to make sure that, as Rob was mentioning, in order to really make it effective, we do need to have phase 2 of the Metro Rail open so that we are able to kind of see what traffic settles down to on Wiehle Avenue afterwards. Because there's a lot of people, coming in from west of Reston right now that are coming into the station area that will have 6 other stations actually that they can access. So the traffic on Wiehle will change. So we do need to let that kind of equalize. So we may not be able to start until that happens. Sometime next year.
Okay.
What is the estimated date on the opening?
I would say summer of 2021.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I don't see any more hands up. I will just mention that so in addition to just questions based on the information that was presented to date, again, we'll take suggestions also, and this can be done offline as well, on if you give it some thought about how we could summarize this data and this information. We'll likely send out like our first attempt at it, and then get some feedback. But be thinking about that as well. as we kind of formulate all of our opinions, as Lori had said earlier.
I think the goal would be to really gather people's opinions, not necessarily in this meeting where the more vocal folks might speak up, but to gather people's opinions on a working sheet, and then share that with the team so that everybody can see what other people are thinking and why, and what their reasoning is behind it. I still am not quite sure if we should do some kind of survey. Maybe that's opening up a box of worms. I'm not 100 or not. And so I'm still mulling that around in my mind. But, at least summarizing and getting everyone in this group's opinions on what we should do, and then sharing it together and being able to read what other people are thinking, having, been thoughtful and laid down your ideas for other people to read. I think that might be helpful. And maybe we can organize that and send that out for before the December meeting, or should we try and do that for January meeting, since December might be kind of, I don't know if it's good to distract more during a pandemic or to, give people a break during a pandemic.
I have a housekeeping question, please.
Yes, ma'am.
What is the date that our deadline for making this decision or recommendation? How long? And then I have a comment.
So we have 24 months from October 15th of last year, which would be October 15th of next year.
Okay.
That is to get it to the Board of Supervisors, which means that, based on board dates and everything, I would really appreciate if we can get this done ahead of that.
Okay, so we're talking about October of 21, we have to be finished?
But yes. we have to bring an item to the Board of Supervisors.
Okay, my comment is that right now, the WMATA does not have funds to hire the people to run phase 2 of the metro until at least July of 21. So we need to get this to the board right after that. So we're going to just have to suck it up and pretend we know something we don't know unless we get it some sort of an extension.
So I think you're exactly right, Tammy. We just have to give it our best. That's why we're not really giving a final decision. We're giving here are our thoughts so that Walter can make that decision for us as informed as possible. Unfortunately, there are way too many items that are going to be out of our control.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, Tammy, I didn't see us continuing our efforts too much into 2021. I believe we would wrap up and do our best to summarize our findings, and then that could be the starting point for Tom and his consultants to maybe take from that and learn from that as they get into the Wiehle Avenue study for future consideration. But I believe that our group has been the community voice here. I mean, we started with a lot of outreach, and we've had a lot of people from the community participate in this group, much like we have tonight. I know a couple of people have dropped off, but we've given everybody ample opportunity to kind of stay involved and keep the word out. So I think we're getting a good cross section of voices here, and I think we'll be able to summarize it in a manner that's helpful to people moving forward once a little bit more data comes in, and then the real experts can take over and really make some headway with it. Bruce Wright, did you have another comment?
Yes, I do. A couple of quick comments and then a question. It seems like we could finish our work much sooner than October. We've had a lot of discussion about the various options. I think most everybody's weighed in. And I really like the idea that Lori had of having a matrix that shows in summary form. It'll be hard to condense the comments, the pros and cons, but to have the various options with the pros and cons, and that's valuable information, I'm sure, to Walter. The question is, Tom, do you have an idea? Well, how much do you anticipate that study is going to cost for Wiehle Avenue?
I don't have it right at my fingertips, but I can look it up during the meeting, and I can have an answer for you. I just need to go look up the memo that we sent over. It's a couple $100,000.
Yeah.
Mark, you may remember. I think it was 200,000, maybe.
I don't recall off the top of my head, and I don't want to get information wrong.
I can look it up when while we're talking here.
All right.
Following up on that, I do want to know what several people have already said, which is that when this moves forward to the Board of Supervisors, as Supervisor Alcorn has mentioned since the beginning of this, which we've very much taken to heart, is that we want to make sure everybody's voice is heard, and that rather than thinking of it as a vote, where somebody wins and somebody loses, we want to bring forward a series of perspectives to the board, and so that might result that, let's say, 60% of the people who vote favor option A. But that doesn't mean option A wins. It simply means that, the breakdown was such, and we want to make sure that any comments that people have, any other information people have, they want, there'll be an opportunity to speak up on that and provide that in other ways. So we're certainly not going to, misrepresent, if 40% of the group favors a different opinion than 60% of the group, that is some sort of consensus. We'll explain it as simply that 60% favored one option and 40% favored another option. Of course, obviously there'll be more than two issues. On that note, though, a colleague of mine just found the estimate, and it is $200,000. So, Tom, you were right on the mark for the second phase of the Wiehle Avenue study.
Great,
so
thanks.
Hopefully that all gives everybody a little bit of comfort. And keep in mind that as the next phase of the study moves forward, we will be able to continue to evaluate where we are with the Metro project, because at worst, the road would stay the same as it is. What we're going to look at with this study are opportunities to improve the multimodal nature of the corridor, as Tammy mentioned, a crossing on the east side, looking at the number of lanes and the configuration. So, maybe that's a way to think of it. The base condition is what we're at today. If traffic disperses as we hope that it will, then there'll be opportunities to make the corridor even more pedestrian friendly.
Thanks, Mark.
So-
I think that was a great description you gave about maybe how our response will go to the Board of Supervisors. And one thing that really quickly came to mind, when we do community outreach a lot at some of our other meetings, picture sometimes we're in the South Lakes cafeteria and we're putting all little dots, we're all given like 20 dots, and we get to exercise the dots wherever on different ideas. I mean, I can almost picture some sort of matrix that we all get to populate our dots in some way that, some people put them all on one and some people spread them out a little bit, but it starts to show a real
Trend.
migration towards certain ideas, and that might be more helpful to people. So.
Yeah. So when you guys were all thinking about that, it was sort of gelling in my mind on next steps. I actually was thinking that we would be able to come up with a presentation no later than March, and having the next steps be something like, step one is look at this matrix and weigh in on it, all of us. Step two is do a quick survey of this team, and that could be dots, or it's a survey of I guess we have to make the survey, but I've got a draft survey already, and people can add to these draft questions. And then I think the final version of what we put together should be a combination of the information that came from that and a personal statement from everybody who's here and why they think a certain way. So, supporting your idea, but no more than a paragraph. So I think that kind of, it's sort of a three-part wrap up where we have all our ideas, we have all our opinions. Some of them are different, but they're at least represented and they're all put forth so that Walter can read them all. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. And I guess we just need to structure it so that everybody can weigh in. One of the ways that I've been working very recently a lot is with collaborative products where everybody can write on the same document at the same time. I know that's a little newer technology for some folks, but it's really quite amazing when you work together on a document or you work together on a product. Is anybody opposed to that, or anybody not able to work that way? Or has anybody worked that way? Maybe I should just say it that way first. Has anybody else done that recently? Used maybe Google Docs to do document creation across a team? Anybody? Hand raises? I got one hand raised.
My video's not on, but my hand is up.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's not going to work with this group. Okay.
Yeah, Connie's hand, there were several hands you didn't see.
There were quite a few there, so.
Yeah.
I think Scott Murray has a question.
No, he doesn't have a question. He just put his hand up.
No, that wasn't a hand up in support of Google Docs. I actually hate that method of working.
Okay. All right. Then
anything that doesn't tell me that something's been changed without me having to go back and reread the entire document, to me, is counterproductive.
Well, I can make you a commenter and not an editor, and then you. I'm
going to offer to Rob and Lori that if you guys want to send me all of the matrices with the pros, the cons, I'm more than happy to help contribute to putting together some sort of flow sheet that kind of indicates the if-then pieces of this. A crosswalk is an immediate, a bridge, any of the bridge options become contingent upon, and just try to compile all of that. And then I would recommend that we, much like you and Rob were thinking, I would recommend that we have some measure of laying out those pros and cons and priorities as you start open with Lori. Have the people rank overall which option they rank them all, 1 through 7, 1 through 6, whatever we come up with.
Right.
But also into sub rankings of what their priorities are, and then we can work towards coming up with some sort of formula that weights all of those.
I like that even better.
Coming up with something that says, 52% prefer Bridge A, but when you start looking at their priorities, they actually lead to a different conclusion.
So here's how I'd like to, if it's okay, wrap up this meeting is with this thinking. Scott, you and I, Rob, Jose, we're going to huddle down and mark, just a few of us, and work on this. First blush of a document together, first blush of a rubric that then will float to this team. And you all will, when we send it out, maybe before next meeting, and if it can be December, if we can get our act together, it can be December. And then we can hand it to you guys to poke holes in, to add your comments in, to question, to, add to. And that way we have a product that we've all created. And then we can decide that we what our next step is and how to present it and how to measure people's interest in 1, 2, or 3. I have some ideas around that. I've done it a couple times, and so love to make this a community effort and have that would just be a sweet bow around this whole product, is that it begins and ends with you. So
Lori, we have a couple of comments here, people with questions. Before I get to Tammy, Bruce Wright, you had your hand up first.
okay.
Yeah, just to say, I do like Lori's idea. I think that should work well. Thinking about all this, I guess it's a question. It sounds like the ad grade crossing is going to happen regardless, and I'm just wondering if that can't happen as soon as possible. I mean, is there a way that could happen fairly early in the process, or is that going to be something that only happens when the RUP is issued?
So, Bruce, there were a number of problems with the ad grade crossing when you add a particular bridge because of the security around the bridge that we found out at the past meeting. And so it actually precluded us from creating an ad grade crossing if you chose a bridge. So your first statement was actually not after we found out the details around the security that a bridge had to have, like the particular railings that they had to have. There wasn't enough room for an at grade crossing anywhere near where we were thinking of doing it. So,
sorry, Lori, I apologize for any confusion. That depending on where the piers are, and it's not necessarily in terms of security, but safety in terms of a vehicle hitting the bridge. Safety. Depending on where the piers are, it may result in sight distance issues. And one of the things that could result in would be the infeasibility of an at-grade crossing. Other things that could result in is prohibiting turns on red, or more likely requiring during design that the piers be placed elsewhere. So the biggest issue was actually not to the pedestrian crossing, it was to the vehicles on the road being able to see at the entire intersection, what VDOT would call a clear zone. It would impact the clear zone. So I just want to be clear that putting in an overpass doesn't necessarily preclude an at-grade crossing, and most likely what VDOT is willing to approve would specifically make sure that an at-grade crossing is feasible there, because we'd still need to have sidewalks going north and south. So once you have the sidewalks going north and south, you could get a crossing. So I apologize. I know this is a lot. There's a lot of technical information here, and so I want to make sure that that's clear.
And let me just say that now that I think about it, that may not make a lot of sense to put it in ahead of time, because there's really not going to be much there on the other side. There won't be a sidewalk. There won't be a development to get to. So I think it's a moot point. So I'll retract that suggestion.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bruce. Tammy.
Please, please, please. There is a lot going on in Fairfax County. We have ZMOD coming up. Please do not rush this into January or think we're going to be done in March. Please let us have some breathing room. We are going to have a lot of discussion in the community on other major issues. The rest and comp plan is underway. Just let's not rush. Yes, we want to get it. We don't want to let this lag, but for God's sake, it's the holidays, it's dark, it's COVID. Give us some breathing room, and let's not have a December meeting unless this is something urgent that comes along. Please.
This is not urgent, and I will take that as a permission to not have a December meeting.
Thank you.
Ho, ho, ho.
Here.
Okay.
Okay, Mark Dreyfus, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. One of the things that I know that we're always concerned about is the posterity of everybody's comments and making sure that everyone is able to provide things that are written. And so that's my only concern about a shared Google Doc. Great point is that not intentionally, but it's always possible someone goes in there and says, oh, well, I would write this a little differently, and they start changing some wording. So for the record, probably best, I know Jose has mentioned this before, so Jose, you can hit me on the head if this is the wrong way to go about it, but I know that in the past we've said if there's any comments that there's the email address that he's set up, people can email them, and then we make sure that everybody's comments are on the record exactly how they wrote them, and nothing is accidentally modified to read
That's
different.
a great idea. That's a great idea. Thank you, Mark. Yes. No, I took information to heart. Did we lose somebody? You back, Mark?
But Mark's cutting in a little bit.
Here.
You know, Miss Quinn is on, or I think is wanted to make a comment.
Finola.
Can you hear me now?
There you go. Yep.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. It was just Bruce's comment about the at-grade crossing made me want to jump in. With the at-grade crossing, one of the things I've been always looking for and looking for is actually the design of that crossing. Like, there's a lot more to the crossing than just the crosswalk across the street. There's a lot of opportunity to make that a designed thing that will work better. And I'm not hearing about design of that crossing so that it's optimal safety wise and stuff like that. So I'm just not hearing it as a designed thing. And there is opportunity for things like a different radius and stuff like that, and issues about the location and the exposure and all sorts of details that go into an at-grade crossing.
Finola, did you receive the handout that addressed the different types of at-grade crossings? We looked at 2 of them and the changes that would be made to them.
This is this month?
No.
No, I probably didn't.
Yeah, Jose.
Only seen one layout.
Yeah, Jose, let's make sure that Finola gets that, both of the presentations, because they actually lay out exactly what you're talking about, Finola. You're absolutely right. The at-grade crossing needed some tweaking, and there were actually some other options out there for a different type of at-grade crossing.
And even, I mean, more than tweaking, because that is not going to be the easiest of at-grade crossings to navigate. I would hope that there would be sort of substantial design that goes into that. So
we actually had one
to see the 2 options.
Yeah, we actually had an option of making it a mid street crossing, and completely redoing how it was done. So you need to see that information so that you'll understand one of the.
So you're saying the at-grade in 2 locations, not different versions of that one crossing.
Who's the most well versed on this here? It's not me.
Well, Laura, let me just chime in here. This is Rob. So I think what Ms. Quinn is saying is something we verbally talked about, but we really haven't seen it represented a lot with graphics, was the idea of narrowing the streets, narrowing the lanes, making the crossing a little bit less long. And there's ways to try to accomplish that with lane narrowing and repositioning of the radiuses and tightening the radiuses instead of making them like grander at the various intersections. And so there's a combination of things that could be done and could be looked at and could be very effective, in addition to exactly the placement of the crossing, which is what we focused a little bit more on, where we've looked at various options up near the toll road, and then there was a mid-block crossing option that was represented graphically. But there's some hybrids that kind of fall in between that really haven't been graphically represented to this group, and but I think that they could be very accommodating to, I think, a lot of the comments we've heard over the over this whole entire year.
I think that captures it, because anything I've seen has just been crosswalk laid down on the geometry that's there right now. And that's like, there's a lot more that could be done.
Okay, so Scott, did you have any other comments? Your hand's still up, but I'm not sure that's active.
I do not.
Okay. And Mark Dreyfus, we took care of you. So I mean, that's really all we had for tonight. I think what we heard tonight was let's not have a December meeting, which I think is great. I think we, Lori and Scott and I could probably, and with Jose's help and maybe work a little bit behind the scenes on some things, and then maybe get some information out to folks. But I do encourage us to kind of think about. And Tammy, I appreciate your comment, but there's a lot going on, but I think we're close to where we can start wrapping our thoughts up and putting them in some context that I think is starts to formulate some ideas here and not necessarily prolong this much more into 2021 unless there's true reason and content to do so. So we'll continue to monitor that. But let's all be thinking about that over the December break, and then look for maybe some information we'll send out in draft form over that time period, and then we'll work on another date for our next meeting. I'm going to right now assume it's in sometime in January, and we'll pick a snowy night so everybody isn't going to be able to go anywhere anyway. So.
Hey Rob, can you promise me snow down here in Lakeland, Florida?
No, I cannot.
So
listen, if nobody has any other questions, I think let's call it a night for now. It's just about an hour, so that gets everybody home or moving on to other for this evening.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah,
I really appreciate everybody's help.
See ya. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, Laurie and Rob. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.